Where have you noticed the biggest savings? Is it housing, healthcare, groceries? Where are you noticing that giant big chunk that's coming out?
I think the two big chunks are housing and healthcare insurance. We were paying through the nose for healthcare insurance in the
Even
United
through my
States.
employer, my share of cost.
Yeah.
Any big lifestyle or spending habits that you changed moving overseas for better or for worse? I guess in the beginning you guys said you were paying much more attention. Was there a little bit of stress or anything else that was kind of a concern when you were moving when it came to the budget concern?
One of the biggest changes is that we just don't use a credit card the way we used to use credit cards. In Europe, credit cards are with our bank, it's really set up that if you use the credit card, it's going to all come out the next month. And so it's very much like using an Amex. And in the States, we used Visa and MasterCard. And every once in a while, if we got frivolous, we would just sort of pay it off over several months.
Yeah.
We really don't deal with that. We don't do that
And we
anymore.
don't really need to.
And we don't.
It's
And
much easier to save up if there's something we really want.
use of a debit card is very easy, and it keeps us on a budget. I mean,
Yeah.
we're on a fixed income now. It's a whole different way
It's
of
much
thinking
easier
and
to
living.
budget here, and it's not as stressful being on a budget here, especially when you're planning for big expenses like traveling or like you said, buying domestic electronics or furniture or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a really nice way to keep yourself into your own budget by just not having a huge credit line. I mean, who would have known?
It was such a new thing to us to be changing a lifestyle where you knew that you always had income coming in and you had savings and you were building up your savings and everything. And now it was, okay, well, we don't have income that's going to continue to keep building up savings. Now we don't want to touch the savings, which are continuing to build it up. And we want to live only on the interest. And so it was a whole different mindset, but we've gotten quite comfortable with it.
Yeah, I feel like this is a huge concern for most retirees. So if you could boil that whole idea down into one sentence, what would your answer be for how things have changed in terms of your budgeting since leaving the US?
I think it's what Grandma D used to say, just grandma. She said, proper planning.
Prevents problems.
And that's really
And caviar taste on a beer budget
just doesn't work.
doesn't work. That was another one of her sayings. But I think what you to boil it down, I think it's less stressful to follow a budget here than it would be in the States because there's so many unknowns back in North America with, if you have any surprises with a healthcare issue, or if you have a problem with your vehicle, which you really rely on in the States. Here, it's just amazing. The public transportation, if you live in the city, is really nice.
Yes,
It's just much easier to budget here.
It's the lack of unknowns. And
Yeah.
also okay, in 2 months,
I-
we'll have enough of our discretionary income to book that cruise.
Yeah, no, and I've heard this from so many people is it's those unexpecteds. It's the new carburetor or the, random hospital stay that just can plunge you into this cycle of debt. But Jeff, you mentioned something that I would like to focus on. You mentioned how the public transport can be so great. So how important is it to kind of integrate with the local lifestyle in order to reap these cost saving benefits? You're walking more, using public transportation, shopping at the local markets. You guys mentioned that you do have a car now, and you mentioned that is one of the biggest costs. So it kind of seems like the more local you live and the more you use and rely on the local infrastructure and amenities, the less life can cost. Would you say that's true?
Agreed. Because we live in a more suburban area outside of Porto, you kind of need a car out here. It really helps, especially if you're going to run a lot of errands. Like I run a lot of errands just locally, usually within several kilometers of home. So gas isn't a huge expense for us because we keep it local. But if you do choose to live in or in the city or near a public transportation line, those are going to be huge cost savings for you. For like example, when we lived in Braga for 2 years, we were right on the public transportation line. We never needed a car. It was super easy to get around the city. So if you are planning to do a city living thing, look at living, reasonably close to any of the public transportation lines, which are usually within easy walking distance, especially if you're thinking about moving to Porto, which is really hilly, just like Lisbon. So,
But I also have to admit, Jeff is very good about plotting out and planning. And if he's going to use the car to go to the supermarket, he's also going to make a stop at the pharmacia. He's going to make a stop at
I combine
and
errands.
he combines everything up. And the expense that we're using of the car here is about the equivalent of the expense that we used on monthly transportation
It's a little bit more.
cards in Braga, just a little bit more, but it's for convenience sake more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
And-
good to know. It's very interesting to see that you've actually tracked it and that it's just a little bit more than the public transportation, which, right, if you're using it enough, it becomes a significant monthly expense. But great to know that you can track those differences. So do you have any advice for somebody who wants to move abroad specifically to reduce their cost of living?
Yeah, definitely get the private health insurance. You'll find it can be a huge money saver as far as convenience. The public healthcare system is good, but not perfect and can be due to delays.
But public health care is,
It is really good, but
I mean,
but sometimes there are delays when you want to see a specialist.
but much less expensive with public health care.
Honey,
Okay.
man, thank you. Um, You're funny. The other thing I would say is if you need a car, get a car. But really, if you can move into a situation like we did when we were in Braga, or a lot of folks who live in nearby Matosinhos, which is several kilometers away, or in Porto, which is 15 kilometers away, if you can live in one of those in a major city, you can save yourself a lot of time just using the public transportation. You just have to plan it a little more, especially if you're going to do multiple things.
All right. So when you look overall at your financial life now, as opposed to back home or back in your former home of California, how has cutting your cost of living what has that meant to your quality of life? I think you guys said this in the beginning, but I want to remind everyone of the benefits that you've reaped from this.
I don't commute anymore. Any work that I do, I pretty much do from home now with you guys, with you Live and Invest Overseas. So that's nice, except for the once a year conference we go to. So that's nice, not having to commute to work an hour each way each day. That's a lot less stress. Also, I think our quality of life here has gotten better as far as just less stress. The Portuguese people here by nature are, for the most part, much more peaceful and calmer and move at a much slower pace.
Unless you're talking about competing football teams.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
and
of
politics.
course.
We avoid those two subjects here whenever we can. So yeah, I would say the quality of life here is we've enjoyed a much more peaceful, less stressful quality of life here. Definitely as
Excellent.
opposed to living in the United States.
Yep.
Excellent.
And there's just none of the stress and anxiety of am I going to be able to cover all of this next month kind of thing. It just isn't that anymore.
Yeah.
So exploring and finding a rich cultural exciting life in Europe with all kinds of experiences to explore has become wonderful, and it fits within our budget when the United States didn't anymore.
Yeah.
Well, especially
Great.
now, it's gone up so much.
And people do say that Portugal is the California of Europe. So if you're looking to just kind of trade, but pay less, but maintain the same kind of lifestyle, it seems like a perfect fit. Are you able to put any real numbers on it? Roughly how much per month you were spending in California versus what you would spend now?
I'd say in California, a random budget would be around
5,000.
5,000 to 7,000, and it would sort of fluctuate a little bit. And here, we're hard pressed to go over 2,500 euros a month.
Nice.
We're comfortable with 2,500 to 3,000 euros a month. So
3,000 if we splurge, like go on a trip or do something,
Yeah.
do it on eating out or go to local performances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's great. And all right, let's say with a final word of advice to someone who's watching and might be worried that they can't afford to move abroad, what would your advice to them be?
Get a tablet out, write down what you're paying right now for basic items, and then do a little research. Check it out.
You can find most of that information on the Live and Invest Overseas Portugal Index.
Yes, you can.
I definitely would. I would get the index and start shopping countries that fit what you want as a lifestyle, what you want to dream about.
Yeah.
Because it's doable.
And if you like the numbers, then the next step would be to come out and visit.
Yep. Plan a vacation, but it's got to be a boots on the ground, pretending that you're living there kind of
Yes.
vacation.
Great
Right.
advice. We can do a whole nother video on what that means and how to do that. But
Yes.
we're going to wrap it up there for today. And thank you guys so much for sharing everything about how you have cut your monthly expenses by half living in Portugal. Thanks for joining me today.